I think that might be you, Ari.
You think?
Maybe not. I don't know. I see the mic going. It's hard to tell.
Let's see. Oh, you know what? Maybe my.
Okay. I'm going to keep Ari muted for the moment, and maybe we figure things out. But I am going to share my screen and kick things off, and we can get started. All right, folks. Well, welcome to November. Thank you for joining us. It is lovely to see you all. I love this big screen of people. Feel free to come off. Well, it's not come off mute. Enable your video and say hi, give us a wave. It's great to see you. I want to kick off by thanking sponsors. Sponsors, as you'll see, are a big reason why this continues to happen every month. They keep things working for us, and we really appreciate that. So first off is Cloudbees. They've been with us for a while. If you haven't checked them out, if you're in the DevOps space and you don't know Cloudbees, you really should. They are an essential DevOps tool chain provider, and I'm sure you can find out a lot about them on their website. I want to introduce our newest sponsor, BMC. We have Richard here from BMC. Richard, tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what you want this community to know about BMC. Oh, I can't hear you. That might just be me. No audio yet. It might be working now. No luck. All right, let me come back to you. You could try jumping on something else or test this out. Still nothing. Okay, we'll come back. I want to thank JFrog, as always. They've been with us for quite a long time. They have been wonderful to the community. Very pleased to have them. Very pleased to have Ari here in person to talk to us again. And he's got some news that he wants to share about the latest happenings from JFrog.
Cool. Hey, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. I'm Ari Waller, and I am the Meetup event manager for JFrog. And as Steve said, we're just really glad to be a sponsor for your Toronto DevOps Meetup group. It's been an honor for the last couple of years, and we're looking forward to going into our third coming 2022. For those of you who are not familiar with JFrog, we are the DevOps software company founded in 2008. Many people in the DevOps community know us best by our flagship product, Artifactory, which is considered by many to be the gold standard for managing your artifacts and dependencies. JFrog, one of the things I like best about it is it's always been committed to the DevOps technology communities. And one of the things that we like to offer the community is some of our hands-on workshops that are free. In fact, Melissa, who is sharing today, will also be sharing at a workshop tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time called Container Image Management for Everyday DevOps. And there is a QR code right there. We still have a few seats left if you would like to join. We give you the software that you need for free, not a trial version, but a free version. And we would love for you if you to join us. And it's actually a 1-hour hands-on workshop, so it gets right to the point. So I think you'll enjoy that. Another one of JFrog's core values is community happiness. And for that, JFrog has a raffle just for attendees. JFrog is going to give you a chance to enter to win a Nintendo Switch and 2 games. You can enter by using the QR code that you see. And also, I will drop in the chat both of the bit.ly links that you see as well. I'll leave the raffle open throughout the meetup today, and then we'll close it. Winners will be selected within 2 business days. Because of compliance reasons, I cannot go ahead and do live drawings. I wish I could. However, we do randomly select a winner, and then we will contact them via email. And once they formally, or you formally, accept the prize, we will share the name of the winner with the entire community. So with that being said, Steve and Sivas, we just really, really appreciate you having us as part of your community.
Very pleased to have you. Thanks. And let me tell folks, like, the odds are very good with this ratio for something like a raffle. I mean, I wish I've removed myself from competition from these things, being a prior beneficiary of these raffles, but I do recommend you jump in on that, because I don't think you can beat those odds.
That's pretty good odds.
Pretty good odds. So with that, I'm going to toss back to Richard for a moment. Hopefully we've got audio success.
Do we have success?
Oh, we have success.
Awesome. Got the headset on, so I think it all should be good here. But my name's Rich. Don't want to take up too much time. I'm with BCM Software. We're one of the new sponsors, and this is our 2nd session. So super excited to be part of the DevOps community here, Toronto, Canada, and further afield. So what we do is we help DevOps teams specifically around the areas of automation. So we frequently work with DevOps, site reliability, cloud, data teams. We help them to automate large parts of the work, and we become the glue basically to help tie together their applications. That's all I'll say for now. I know there's some info on the slide there. Really looking forward to getting to know the community, and of course hearing from Melissa today. So thanks, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
Excellent. Very pleased to have you. Welcome. Okay, so with that, moving right along, I would be remiss if I did not repeatedly mention my little ebook that I would love for everybody to check out and send me your most scathing reviews of your most honest and constructive feedback or otherwise. But I really think this crowd would get a kick out of it. I think it should help you in your roles wherever you are, individual contributor, leader, aspiring leader. So do check that out. Do let me know if it does help you out with any aspect of where you sit in your organization, understanding strategy, tactics. That would be wonderful. News about that, actually. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we are working away. We actually submitted a manuscript to IT Revolution for the big book, the real book that's going to be coming out based on flow engineering. So that's moving forward. There is the newsletter at inside-out.work, which is going to be basically every 2 weeks, chronicling that journey towards like putting the book out and collecting all the cases around folks doing different aspects of flow engineering in different places, value stream management, flow improvement, ways of working. And what's the other piece? Oh, and working on the Value Stream Management Consortium as well. So the Value Stream Management Consortium is going to be incorporating aspects of flow engineering into its body of work and practice. So I will keep everybody up to date on that. But if you haven't checked out the Value Stream Management Consortium, that's another thing to take a look at. I think it really does expand the scope and value of something like DevOps to really end-to-end the whole delivery, build, release, deploy, validate cycle, and to kind of act as a next generation DevOps framework. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with me, but I will post those 2 links because I think they're definitely worth checking out. And with that, introducing next month. So next month, we are going to be looking at DevOps in the context of the pandemic, obviously everyone's favorite topic that we have not heard enough about. But what does it mean to us, right? What does it mean as an example, as an analogy, as a metaphor? What does it mean to the way that we work and the way that we will work in the future? So stay tuned for that. We'll be posting and announcing that formally right after this. But with that all said, I want to introduce Melissa and hand off to her. She has graciously joined us to share what she knows, and very interested to hear about this. We've had a lot of CI/CD pipeline delivery and release content lately from many different angles, and I love that we have all these talks that kind of look at different facets of this core aspect of DevOps, because you really can't look at this from too many angles. It's very fundamental, it's very important, and so everything from platforms a couple months ago to looking at pipelines now. Hopefully all of this is coming together for you folks at a different level and with different detail. So very pleased to have this talk. I'm a huge fan of pipelines. And with that, I will hand off to Melissa and get out of the way. Thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for hosting me. Really happy to be here. And, with all of this virtual events and everything, I may not be able to be there. So there is an advantage to all of this, right? We're getting better and better at doing this, and seeing people on Zoom screens and talking to each other, learning how to interact this way. And because of that, I've been many places all over the world doing this, which is pretty fun. Okay, so Steve, thank you for that introduction. This is a session on DevOps that matters, demystifying CI/CD and build pipelines. And this session is actually less technical from a code perspective, meaning it's not really a tutorial on how to implement specific DevOps tools, but instead, this is just more thought-provoking around your current development and deployment processes. And my goal here is to provide you with at least one or two things that you can take back to your teams that will help you be more efficient or improve the quality of your application or service. All right, that said, a little bit about my background. I am a developer through and through. I became a developer advocate at JFrog about 1.5 years ago. In fact, right before everything shut down. So this picture here is actually from a conference that I went to in Edinburgh. It was an UNconference. And these were conferences that I went to that are very informal. You decide what you talk about when you get there, depending on who arrives, and they're very small. Instead of listening to a person, speak at you from behind a lectern, it's more of a circle discussion where everyone is involved. And these kinds of conferences were my absolute favorite and introduced me into the conference circuit in general, even formal conferences as well. And it was something I was interested in, a little hard to do with my full-time development job. I have been all the way from an intern to a principal. So it's over 20 years of experience. I'm hoping that I can take all of that and now use it more to teach and spread the word, so to speak. Anyway, my primary language is Java. Java server side was the majority of my career, but I did have the great opportunity to start out in a services company where we pretty much worked on whatever came in the door at the time. So my experience is definitely polyglot, very broad, many different languages, all of that. So my dev background means that all of my talks come from a dev perspective, and you'll see that through this talk as well. I genuinely want to address development and operation woes, but I definitely come from the development sphere. JFrog aligns really well with me. They, are a DevOps company. One of the last teams that I was on was a DevOps team, and that was a new experience for me. And I'll talk to you a little bit about how that went down. So I was on a Ask Me Anything session recently. It was a panel at a conference, and the question was asked, why should a developer care about DevOps? And that answer involves a lot of my own personal experience of moving to a DevOps team, because when I started on that team, that was a whole new world for me. I was definitely from the background where I had my own silo, I had my headphones, I had my corner, and that's how I worked. I did have experience with pair programming, that kind of stuff. But as far as dealing with anything in the ops realm, it just didn't happen. I coded my fixes, I checked stuff in, and then it was thrown over the wall and someone else deployed it, someone else monitored it, someone else got the metrics from it, and then would come back and complain to me. That's how that cycle worked. So now all of a sudden I needed to consider deployment environments and how code runs. I had to start caring more about memory, other resource requirements, the load on the service. If my code wasn't efficient, of course, I'd have some work to do to improve that. And I also needed to consider installation procedures, how to troubleshoot an actively running system without taking it out completely. So I'd have to offer some help there with troubleshooting in production. And I just learned that we needed ways way beyond my local dev environment, debug logs, to monitor the health of the application as well. So it definitely started to care more about observability tools, not just whether it was up or down, but whether that service is running smoothly, whether it was, we had some containers, so I needed to care if those containers started restarting over and over again, which I've definitely had happen, whether the service was running efficiently, if it was accepting a lot of requests, and whether it's being attacked somehow, DOS attack or some bad actor taking advantage of a known vulnerability, for example. So a developer cares about DevOps because knowing how your application is actually deployed and its behavior in production, that will influence decisions on how you design your application and how you structure your code. So we're going to define DevOps starting out. We're going to describe some of the components. We'll discuss the IT value stream. And then along the way, I'll share some stories and some suggestions that have come my way over the past many years. So what is DevOps or DevSecOps? The good old Wikipedia definition: DevOps is a set of practices that combine software development, dev, and IT operations, ops. It aims to shorten the system's development lifecycle and provide continuous delivery with high software quality. This is all, I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sure that this audience knows what DevOps is, but I think one of the things that's missing in this definition is more about communication between teams, and we'll discuss that a little bit more as we move on here. Inferring from this definition, we can say that if DevOps is developers and operations, DevSecOps includes security. That's another important aspect that we need to be considering and including in our processes as we create our pipelines. All right, I'm giving you some resources at the beginning instead of the end. These are 3 excellent books. If you are anywhere near DevOps, these should just be required reading for everyone. The Phoenix Project is an executive's perspective of a project that was failing, and it's a really good story. It's written in the form of a novel, so you get involved with the characters and things that are happening. This is a really good book. The sequel, The Unicorn Project, is from the developer's perspective. Obviously, that one was my favorite because it came from my world and looking out. Another really good book. The last is more of an instructional manual on how to put DevOps principles into practice. They talk about the principles of flow, the principles of feedback, the principles of continual learning and experimentation. It's been a few years since I've read these, but I'm probably going to pick them up and reread them. Things change really fast, and these are like good movies. You can read them again and pick up new stuff the next time through. All right, this is a slide that I see often in our corporate decks that we use for presentations and stuff, usually for when we're talking about our product in general. So as you can see, of course, all the JFrog stuff is in the middle because the world revolves around us, right? So that's why this is here. But I like this slide just because it gives a very detailed step-by-step of the software development lifecycle. And it is really busy, but it really does highlight how overwhelming the DevOps can be when you're presented with all of this stuff that's in the market right now. And this is just a touch of it. There's a lot more tools and stuff out there that are not represented on this slide. But anyway, this space is huge and it's really easy to get lost in the mix. And this whole process is just an attempt to answer the questions: how do I build everything? How do I test everything? And how do I deploy everything? And things that I want to point out here is, at least in a couple places, we need to care, where do dependencies come from? So in the beginning, in step one, when you've got your developer pulling libraries or third-party software down that they're using, that they're not writing themselves, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time, we need to care where those are coming from. Also, the same is true for your build servers. So in step 7, our build servers start running. And again, we need to care where all of those dependencies are coming from. The next is, how do you keep everything secure? If you know where these dependencies are coming from, do you know anything about them? Do you know their contents? Do you know if there are known vulnerabilities within them? Do they get rescanned? As time goes on, we know that new stuff comes out all of the time, new problems come out, and things need to be upgraded and updated. And are we doing that? And do we have a process to monitor that progress? Next, how do I include automation to help increase efficiency and reduce human error? So right away, the first, the big block in automation here is your build servers. Also, if your developer is, if they have continuous integration set up, they could be checking in and it would automatically trigger builds, things like that. So again, as expected, there's quite a few JFrog products that are represented here that handle artifact management and storage distribution, as well as security scanning on those packages. But this setup also has strong integrations with other components and frameworks out there that you're likely already familiar with and may already be using today. So build servers, again, is a good example of that. Like various build and dependency managers as well, Maven, NPM, and your provisioning tools, Chef, Puppet, all of those can be all put together as separate pieces of your pipeline. So I was in a panel recently at DockerCon, and a question came up about the state of DevOps today and what might be coming down the line in the future. And my response was, if you compare existing DevOps tools and components to car manufacturing, we are very early in development still. And what I mean by that is, how many of us would be driving cars today if we had to build them ourselves? So when it comes to software development life cycles, we're still putting most of these pieces together ourselves. And there are a ton of levers to pull, as you saw from the previous slide. And in fact, for a car, we have a general idea of how to make certain components. They're shareable, easily interchangeable when you go to get your car repaired. In fact, in software, we're still in that process of working out how to make the components that make sense, figuring out what is actually shareable, what is interchangeable, so that we don't have to start from scratch every time we're building a pipeline. We do have a pretty good idea of what we need now to get everything up and running. And generally, the tools that we're using will fall within these components or categories. This just simplifies that previous slide a bit and breaks them all down into things that are core components. So we have our source code repository. That's our single source of truth. The next step is a continuous integration, all the tools that fall into that just builds and tests on every integration. We have our package managers. Those handle pulling in our third-party dependencies. We also need to have a full bill of materials for our projects so that we know everything that's going into our projects, and for traceability as well. And then we have our security scanners. So these are the deep scanning of the components that we use within our project, all of the dependencies, even containers. We need to be able to scan those just to eliminate the risk of having trouble with stuff we already know about and we should be protecting ourselves from. And then continuous deployment, that automated deployment to the edge and beyond. Now, that can go both ways, right? I mean, depending on your project, that might be a good thing for you to do continuous deployment, or you may have it set up such that you manually push out a release. There's still automation there, but you control when it happens. It doesn't happen on every check-in, for example. All right, before we go any further, and before you jump in and start implementing a bunch of new processes or a bunch of new tools, get together as a team and determine your values. What are your goals? Every project is different. There's usually a driving factor that will help you figure out what to prioritize. This is where communication between the teams comes into play as well. If your team is prioritizing something completely different than another team, you're undoubtedly going to experience frustration, friction, and there's some really good self-help guidance out there that applies to development teams as well to define what success looks like. Sometimes we get really excited about jumping into something new, and we forget to document what it means to be successful. Your team's values and priorities, they're going to be different than everyone else's. You'll have a different set of skill sets. There's really is no one-size-fits-all solution. Prescribing a particular tool set to your team would be the same as saying everyone should wear a purple skirt size 10. It just doesn't work for everyone. So consider that change can be expensive as well. So choose those changes that will advance your team to that measure of success that you have defined. If you're asking why I have this car photo on here, it's a good question. That is my car. That's the car that I drive. And before you start making fun of me, there's a reason that I drive this car. I have very different values and priorities when it comes to a car. I've never really been into getting the latest and greatest. I just want something that gets me from here to there. It's fine. I don't want to spend a lot of money on it. That's fine. So this car has been awesome, actually. It's lasted me for almost 20 years now. And I got into a little fender bender a couple years ago. And I wasn't going to take it in and get it fixed for, what would cost me more than probably this car is even worse. So I went on Amazon, paid 12 bucks and got myself a magnetic Band-Aid just to be cute. Put it on my little dent, and I'm continuing to drive this car, maybe until I can get into an electric car or something. We'll see. We'll see when it breaks down. But for now, we're good. All right. Hopefully you get that metaphor. Your software is the same. You need to decide what your values are, what you really care about, what matters to you in your project. Interteam communication. So this is the part of DevOps that I think is the most important thing. The whole point is to get your product out there and get everyone on the same page. Everyone understands what success is. Everyone has metrics that they're going by. Observability of our systems is extremely important. And this particular log statement reminds me of a real life story about a disconnect on one of the teams I was working on at the time regarding a specific business value. Most devs have seen a line like this before in the code base. Usually we use these maybe for just local debugging. We want to trace where activity is going on in the application. So we might stick one of these in there. I was working on an efficiency issue at the time, and I implemented a pretty clever fix, at least I thought it was. Anyway, it involved changing this log statement because it was no longer applicable. just for the simple reason that the function was no longer named transform media, and it just didn't make sense anymore to have it there. But unbeknownst to me, that little change caused a huge fuss because I was working in a silo. I didn't really know that this log statement was being used in other teams and decisions were being made based on it. At the time, I was working in an open space, but there were a lot of product, business, and marketing folks that would come down to our floor because we had the better coffee. So they'd often stand around in the kitchen and talk to each other. And I overheard one of these conversations because I heard the name of the application that I was working on. And so I listened. And come to find out, there were some Splunk dashboards set up somewhere that were counting the number of times this log statement was hit. And based on that number, they would decide the health of this product, like whether or not people were actually using it. And it would also help to decide whether to continue work on this project. And what I overheard was that, well, no one's using this anymore, so I think we should just get rid of it. So that would have been pretty sad if I hadn't overheard that conversation. Sure enough, I found out where all of these dashboards were. I had no idea that there were metrics like that being taken and that decisions were being made based on those. So that was a pretty eye-opening experience for me and my team to understand little changes like what we make have big impacts down the road. And if we're not all communicating, we can end up in places we never intended to be. So if you get one thing out of this talk today, it's avoid silos like that, not just between the members of your team, but between teams even. Get on the same page as marketing. Just because you're a developer, it doesn't mean that you aren't involved in the end product and the success of the end product. So make sure that you at least understand the metrics and who is making the decisions on, what goes into that product. When your team decides to charge a hill, make sure that everyone involved in that effort is charging the same hill. This means that communication about these business goals need to flow between all the stakeholders from the business and product level to the engineering and development teams. A lot of the focus on pipelines is on the end result, the service or application that's running in production right now. But something you'll realize with more experience is that your end result is, of course, going to depend on a lot on everything that happens before. So think of your software development lifecycle itself as a product. Consider the processes that you take to get your product to production. Find the waste. Find what slows everyone down. And part of this is determining your priorities. For your situation, is shortening the time between releases the top priority, or is there a need to focus on quality or security? And those might change from release to release. So always go back and evaluate what your priorities are. Something that the DevOps handbook points out is that in the physical manufacturing industry, it's really easy to see bottlenecks. In technology, it takes more effort. We need to implement those methods of making our work more visible. And the best example of this is by using Kanban or sprint boards to make your activities more visible to other teams. Solutions like this help the team stay organized, aware of what team members are up to, but sometimes we forget that these are actually meant to help communication between teams as well. They're not just for internal communication, they can be used for external observation. Keeping this information limited internally to your internal team members defeats half the purpose of these boards. Right, pipelines is not a magical word. Everyone has a pipeline, whether it's manual, whether it's automated, whether it's high tech, whether it's low tech. It's a bit overused. There are so many products and services out there that even have the term pipeline in the name, but generally products that focus on pipelines usually imply automation. pipeline itself is just the steps required to get your code from development to production. Every member of your DevOps team should be familiar with your pipeline. And if not, stop right now, get everyone together and document these steps. You might see some surprises in there. That definitely happened with us when I got on a DevOps team. There were things happening during deployment that I had no idea was going on. The application was getting wrapped in certain ways, configuration was coming from somewhere, and it was a really interesting experience. For each of those steps, look for improvements that you can make. Where can you get the biggest bang for your buck? We talked about making priorities, and as you step through your pipeline, you might adjust those priorities, but just having those priorities is not enough. Make sure that you document your goals and determine what metrics you can use to figure out if you've met them. Start out small with goals that improve some facet by 1%. A good example of a bad goal would be deploy faster. You don't want to give goals like that to your team. It's not specific. You need to start with a baseline and have an actual metric to show success. And you also need to be able to tell, once you've met one goal, when is it time to start focusing on the next priority? Usually when you address one bottleneck, another one comes into view. So you need to be able to know when that move to the next bottleneck is appropriate. This is an excellent time when you're going through this process to start considering different tools and frameworks that promise to help with your flow. But the most important thing I want to stress is always have a reason for that change. Don't just go switching out technologies without having some metrics behind it that proves worthiness. It is definitely fun to play with new stuff, and there should absolutely be time devoted to that. But implementing new tools across the team needs to have serious thought and consideration behind it. You need to have buy-in from your teammates as well in order for it to be successful. And one thing I've learned over the years with all of the promising new DevOps frameworks and technologies out there, there is always a cost associated with switching one out for another. We often are guilty of seeing the pros, and then only after the upheaval of change do we see the cons. I have an actual experience with that, where there was a company-wide mandate to require a specific CI server. Unfortunately, it was a CI server none of us were familiar with, and it was a really difficult change to make. We were used to having autonomy over our own build server, so we all knew how to go in, we all knew how to troubleshoot it, we all knew how to get our stuff done using that CI server. Now we were faced with having to learn a new technology, and there were some issues that came out, for example, requiring the entire company to use a single instance. Obviously was not the best plan. It wasn't very scalable. Builds started to slow down to a halt, and there was quite a bit of upheaval there, quite a lot of time spent on that process. It really doesn't have as much to say about which build server was better than the other. That wasn't really the issue. The issue was not considering the skill sets of the developers and the operation team, and not considering what it was going to take to ramp all of us up on a brand new technology. One problem that I've seen is just not recognizing that there is a problem. And this story is not meant to call anyone out in particular or shame a particular team. It's not really about that. Like I said, all teams are different. They're composed differently, have different backgrounds, different skill sets. I was on a team once where we didn't really have a good process around continuous integration. Most of us were senior, which helped this problem a bit, but invariably, anytime we had someone new come onto the team that wasn't really familiar with how everything worked, problems would arise. So specifically what I'm talking about is we didn't have a pull request process in place. So you would come in the morning and you would need to check your email first, because people would commit directly to the master branch. Okay, so code would come in directly to master. You come in the morning, check your email, because if the build is broken and you download all the latest code, you're kind of stuck until that build is fixed. So those days were called donut days. Whoever was responsible for doing that would be responsible for bringing in donuts. Now, you might not think that's a huge problem, especially if you really like donuts, but it happened to me twice while I was working there. And I did come to realize there's got to be a better way to do this, to protect ourselves from these problems and wasting everyone's time. Basically, I mean, the size of our team was pretty large. So there is a better way. And this area is likely where you will see the most improvements. The requirements are you need source control, you need your central version control system, you need a build server. When source is checked into source code, it is automatically built. But then we needed that one more step. I'm talking about pull requests. So this was the capability to go ahead and commit code. I mean, you may or may not have tested locally. That's the issue. If you're an excited developer and you just want to get your stuff in, sometimes you may miss testing that you should have done before checking it in. That just happens. This is one protection against that. So now you commit your code and it sandboxes it and does the build, determines if the build's going to pass or fail. If it fails, you are notified and you fix it, try again. But the advantage of this is once that build passed, that code can now be merged into master with less risk of breaking everyone. All right, knowing your build. This is another place that developers can help a lot. A build server will do the heavy lifting for you, but there is a lot more that you can do. When I was a junior developer, I got put into a huge Java project that was full of, it was a multi-module Java project. I didn't really know, I was kind of, it's kind of sink or swim back then. And I wasn't really sure how the build was working. So every single time I'd get a bug or something to fix, I'd figure out where it was, I'd rebuild the entire thing. That's kind of silly. And it was only because I didn't understand which components relied on other components. I could get away with only building a couple of the components that the change was involved in without having to rebuild the entire thing, which could take 30, 40 minutes. So these are just things that you can learn as a developer. I wouldn't advise going in, especially as a junior, going in and just learning how to fix a bug. The very first thing you need to learn is how that build works, what depends on what, how all of that is put together. And a lot of that will help in your troubleshooting down the line. Another thing that I noticed is containers. So we had some applications that were being wrapped and packaged into containers. Some of those had old base images involved and nobody knew. I don't want to say nobody knew where they came from, but there was a day when the build broke just randomly and we figured out that it was because a base image was being pulled from a repository we no longer had access to. It turned out to be a third-party contractor that had done that work and given it to us, but no one had taken that step of moving that dependency into a secure location. So that was an interesting problem. Obviously, it was just a phone call to get it fixed and then make that happen. But I mean, what a waste of time. Don't lose your time on silly things like that. Third-party resources that are no longer available. You want to be able to keep your own internal cache of everything that you use to build your project. Your builds should not be reaching out over and over to some remote location to grab your stuff. Once you have your stuff, you need to be able to cache it and store it locally. And don't continue to reach out for it every time. All right, tests. Don't skimp on your test environments. or your QA environments, especially when it comes to integration testing. I've been on teams where, we used a completely different database in development than we did in production. Obviously, that's going to cause problems because we relied on a in-memory database to do all of our unit testing. But when it comes right down to it, the syntax could be different, right? So you need to make sure that your test environments are the same, as close as possible to your production environments. And with the availability of things like test containers, we have very little excuse to have that be any different. We have the capability now to have very, we can use the same database, for example, that we use in production. Maybe not the entire data set, but at least, it would be the same technology that we're using. You can catch sneaky API issues or version problems by doing this and keeping everything consistent. Also, the artifacts that you want to deploy, make sure those have gone through the process of QA and test via promotion, so that the exact same build goes all the way from beginning to end, rather than rebuilding your code base at each step of your pipeline. You want to build it once and then promote that build. Also, if your environments require different configuration, this does not mean build a different build artifact. Stuff like that should not be hard-coded within your project. It needs to be managed outside of your build artifact with different flags on launch, for example. Automated deployment. Talk a little bit more about deployment. Humans are horrible at repeated tasks. We get bored, we get complacent, we always miss something. I was on a project where we had deploy scripts everywhere. And this was a surprise to me because I didn't know that was happening. They were just stored on someone's computer on like operations machines, and they were used to deploy our application. Well, this was a problem when it came time to roll something back or keep track of what was deployed historically. So the first thing that we did was get all of that stuff into source control, and the deployment configuration was treated like its own project with its own releases. So this way we were able to roll back immediately if we needed to. We just chose an earlier version of the configuration project when we did the deployment. It was great. I think that saved us the most time. All right, so summary. I got the 5-minute mark, so let's go through our summary really quick. Understand your project's business value and goals. Eliminate those silos. Get rid of those communication problems. 2, document your flow, your pipeline. You may be surprised by a few things, and this will be invaluable for when devs move on and off the project. 3, prioritize and improve by 1%. Make those goals of yours measurable. 4, make your work and your metrics for success visible. Set yourself up for success by measuring a baseline before you make changes, and set up realistic expectations for the outcome. This will help you with your prioritization if you realize that a change turns into more of a problem than a benefit. Master your CI/CD. Know the details of your build, where your artifacts are coming from, how things are tested and deployed. And then 6, automate where it makes sense. Don't just automate for automation's sake. Automate what will give you the most bang for your buck. And depending on your priorities and your definition of success, you might find that automating only a portion of your workflow is all that's necessary to meet or even exceed your goals. All right, that's it. I can open for questions or discussion, comments, any of that, any and all of those.
Thanks very much, Melissa. Really appreciate that. Yeah, folks, feel free to drop a question in the chat. We got a little bit of time. One question I always like asking to kick things off is, what are you seeing sort of coming in the near future that you're really excited about, aside from holodecks in everybody's house?
Yes. Well, holodecks are pretty interesting. I think those are pretty cool. What I see developing is well, remember my metaphor with the car manufacturing. We're starting to really carve out the different components and stuff that we need. So, and we're starting to categorize them, you know. I'm seeing more and more products that are being developed that solve more than just one issue. They're starting to be, you know, put together, and now they solve, you know, every step of the development process. I do think that that is a relief to a lot of operations and developers to not have to assemble all of those themselves, figure out what integrates with what, and then figure out how to make all that work. I see in the future some help for us down the road there.
That's a great highlight.
Yeah.
Well, now we got a bunch of questions.
All right. How often do you find culture change kills this transformation? Moving from projects to pipeline seems functionally doable, but yes. You know, to be successful, it really does need to come from higher levels. I mean, everyone needs to be involved. I was very fortunate to be working at a company where they actually ordered the DevOps handbooks and gave them to everybody. So there was definitely someone had come in at a C-level and started to preach basically these methodologies, and were, you know, putting them down, making sure that the rest of us got educated in those areas. So yeah, the most success is going to come from up high. Driving that is very difficult, but if you're down, you know, you're the worker bee and you're on a development team trying to drive those, the best thing that you can do is keep those metrics visible, because at some point, managers, someone is going to come by and look at those metrics and say, hey, this team is doing something great over here. Maybe we ought to, you know, look into what they're doing and apply those ideas across other teams. All right. Do you have any tips on enabling DevOps for legacy applications? Oh man, yes. So like I said, only automate what is absolutely necessary. Like only automate what makes sense. I know some of those, you can get these huge applications or huge projects that are really hard to pull apart. And, you know, going all full bore on it and trying to introduce all of these processes at once is a bad idea. Pick one thing to improve on, whether that is your, you know, continuous integration process, whether that's the deployment process. I was on a project that basically had nothing. And the first thing that we focused on was automating the deployment, so we would quit making mistakes when we deployed this application. And that was huge. That gave us the biggest bang for our buck. It took a while, but it was the most worthwhile thing to do. Oh, what type of metrics? So metrics are how long does it take to deploy? I was at a period of time when I was on call for an application, and that was awful. Being a developer on call, not a good idea. I remember coming in one morning and I had been called 30 times the previous night for silly things. I brought those to my manager and I said, look, you really don't expect me to actually work today, do you? I'm tired. I kept getting woken up. So that was one of the first things that we fixed, was the metrics that were causing these alerts on the systems. If there was something that wasn't as urgent, then it didn't need to be calling me in the middle of the night for that. So the metrics are like memory usage, whether or not whether or not your application is up or down. I mean, that's helpful. But process metrics are like, how long does it take to deploy? We eliminated a couple hours from our deployment time by automating some stuff. We got it down to 30 minutes. It was great.
Excellent. Well, that's perfect place to end things. We're at 6 p.m. Melissa, thank you so much. I just posted a note in the chat. I brought all those questions because I really think that they're big questions, and a lot of the community would love to continue discussion on those. So those will be in Slack. I've posted them in our general channel. Hopefully we keep the discussion going. Hopefully we see you back here again, Melissa, at some point. Be lovely to hear an update from you soon. And with that, I will thank everybody for joining us and hope to see you again next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.